Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 866 of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Today is another episode in the Best of Juicebox Podcast series, and today we're going to revisit episode 210, Diabetes Pro Tip, Newly Diagnosed or Starting Over. It originally aired on February 25th, 2019. In this episode, Jenny Smith and I begin the Pro Tip series that you now all know so well. By the way, if you're looking for that Pro Tip series, you can find it at juiceboxpodcast.com or diabetesprotip.com. And of course, right here in your podcast player. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Are you a U.S. resident who has type 1 or the caregiver of someone with type 1? Please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry, complete the survey. When you complete that survey, you are helping type 1 diabetes research to move forward right from your sofa. You also might be helping out yourself and you're supporting the podcast. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Today's episode doesn't have any sponsors, but I want to remind you that if you're looking for the Omnipod 5 or Omnipod DASH, you should go to omnipod.com/juicebox. Want to get that Dexcom G6 or that brand new Dexcom G7? Dexcom.com/juicebox. How about the brand new Contour Next Gen blood glucose meter? contournext.com/juicebox. Start your day off the same way I do, with a delicious scoop of AG1 from Athletic Greens. athleticgreens.com/juicebox. The T1D Exchange is a fantastic organization that helps people with type 1 diabetes, and I'm speaking at their next event. Check out their website, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. You can get your diabetes supplies the same way my daughter does, from US Med, usmed.com/juicebox, or call 888-721-1514. Would you like to use the same glucagon that my daughter carries? You can. Gvoke.com/juicebox. Wow, there's a lot of advertisers. This is why I spread them out throughout the week. CozyEarth.com. I'm sleeping on Cozy Earth sheets. This sweatshirt is from Cozy Earth. Super soft and comfortable. Everything at CozyEarth.com is 35% off when you use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. And hold on, I can't tell you about that one. There's a new sponsor coming next week, but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. So you'll check back and find that. All right, thank you so much for listening to all that. Now let's jump into episode 210, Newly Diagnosed or Starting Over, from the Pro Tip series. This is Jenny Smith and I in 2019, making the very first episode of the now very famous Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast. Welcome to the Juicebox Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Benner. I first interviewed Jenny Smith, the CDE from Integrated Diabetes, back in season 1 on episode 37. At that point, Jenny and I were just talking about different management ideas. But it was then that I realized how much we agreed about type 1 diabetes and the management of the disease. I brought Jenny back on in episode 105, and we really drilled down about A1Cs, what they were and what they weren't. After that second interview with Jenny, I decided that one day I would have her back on to discuss all of the diabetes management ideas that come up on the show. I wanted to break them down into small categories, something that was easily digestible, where we'd stay focused on just one idea. I wanted to create something that you could come back to, hopefully learn from, and if you found useful, share with others simply. And so with that in mind, I give you the first in this 10-part series, Diabetes Pro Tip for the newly diagnosed or for those wanting to start over, with Jenny Smith, CDE. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before becoming bold with insulin or making any changes to your medical plan. If you're a newly diagnosed person with type 1 diabetes or the parent of someone who's been newly diagnosed, what do you think the first things to understand are?
The first things to understand beyond the glucose values are, what does insulin do? How does it work? I think it's a huge one that it's underemphasized, I guess is the best way to put it. Many people, especially adults who are diagnosed, are kind of given this is your insulin, this is the dose to take, and kind of go experiment at home. I feel like that's kind of the way that it is. And I think insulin is a first most important thing to really understand. How does it work? What's the purpose of it? How is it supposed to kind of finish working? And what is its effect for you? Okay.
And so what are some like bare bones ways to come up with those understandings? So I think obviously if you have a CGM, it becomes different, right? If you have a CGM, you can get yourself at a stable spot where you haven't had insulin or food for a while and just give yourself an amount of insulin and see how it moves you. Let's talk for a second about like old school. Do you still teach people that they need to do basal testing?
In a general way, yes. I think especially for pumping is helpful in the beginning because it does, in that basal only time period, it does give you a general idea of how things are being kept with the rate that's at play. I do think that basal testing needs to be more explained, let's say, when we are talking about pumping insulin, though, because there are, as you know, a lot of variables that could be at play in that basal testing time period, especially like from a woman's standpoint. It could very much be that it's not the right time of the month to be basal testing. Right. So all of these variables, or a kid or a teen who is really athletic, right? And there is consistent effect of activity level, and it may be different on different days, but there could be overlap from a day ago that you had a 4-hour practice or a tournament. So basal testing as a general idea, yeah, it can be a really good place to start, especially if you think things are really off in a certain place of the day. But is it the end all be all of knowing where your insulin should be? Not 100% of the time.
Right. And so what I end up telling people when I speak with them is that, you know, if you're having an issue, and that issue could be anything, like you're spiking at a meal, or you're, you know, drifting high all the time, or you're incredibly high all the time, you know, any of those things, you have to first look at your basal insulin.
Yes.
It's absolutely far and away the first thing. I have to apologize to you. Arden's texting me, and I believe she's trying to tell me it's lunch.
That's okay.
Hold on. So lunch, ? So Arden has been sick the last couple of days and pretty kind of resistant, like to her insulin a little bit. But we are ahead of it now. So she's 106 and stable now. But to give you an idea, she woke up at 110. By the time she was getting dressed, she was 120. Then there was this diagonal up. I bolused a unit and doubled her basal for an hour. And 30 minutes later, had to bolus 2 more units to get her back to this 106. Now, she never got over about 150. But she sees that rise every morning, like that little bit of a rise. But this morning I used, I'm going to say 3 units more than I would normally use.
Yeah.
And it's just because she's not feeling quite well.
Again, another reason that basal testing, something like this it's not purposeful. In fact, I think, you know, a lot of people try to overcome that morning time rise with a basal adjustment. But what happens then when you wake up at a different time of the day, right? Or you have a variable schedule. So a lot of times I actually tell people, you know what? Let's look at what the rise is. Don't correct it. Let's watch the rise. Let's figure out how much of a rise are you consistently having. You know what? We can offset it with a dose of bolus.
Okay.
Sometimes that actually hits the mark better than trying to incrementally adjust a basal behind the scene that could actually change day to day.
Right. Okay, so now this is really interesting. Wait till I tell you what just happened. So this is kind of hilarious, but my wife is here. I'm gonna have to walk away for a second and come right back. Arden's pump only has 10 units left in it. And her lunchtime bolus is going to be 12 units. So I just had her do a smaller bolus as a pre-bolus still, and I'm going to send my wife over to swap. I'll be back.
Oh no.
Let me go explain this to my wife. I'll be back in 1 second. The Dexcom G6 CGM is now FDA permitted for 0 finger sticks. That's right, the continuous glucose monitor that Arden has been using forever does not require calibration from a blood glucose meter any longer. But do you know what it does do? It allows you to see your blood sugar speed and direction. Are you rising at 2 points a minute? Falling at 3 points a minute? The Dexcom CGM will let you know with customizable alerts. And if you're the caregiver or someone who loves someone with type 1 diabetes and you'd like to be able to see their blood sugar when they're not with you, that's possible too. Because Dexcom has a share and follow feature that is available for Apple and Android. My daughter's at school right now. We just gave her insulin for her lunch, and I can see her blood sugar. Her blood sugar started to creep up on us a little bit, so I got an alert, and we added some insulin, stopping a rise. The Dexcom G6 features an applicator that is virtually painless. My daughter says she can't feel it at all, and it's completely automatic. One button push, and the sensor bed has been applied. You snap in the transmitter, and you're on your way. You can see your blood sugars on your Apple Watch or other smartwatches, on your iPhone, on your Android phone. You can share it with anyone in the world, anywhere. I can tell you without hesitation that the Dexcom continuous glucose monitor is without a doubt one of the main reasons why we've been able to keep my daughter's A1C between 5.2 and 6.2 for 5 continuous years. To find out more, go to dexcom.com/juicebox or the links in your podcast player's show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com. It's going to be the best decision that you ever made.
So all is okay?
Yeah, it's across the street. Yeah, my wife's going to run over. She's working from home today. And it really does just go to show, I guess, the fluidity that you have to keep around diabetes because, okay, I'm lucky. My wife's here today. If she wasn't, I would have to tell you, hey, I got to go. But in the end, there's no panic here. Arden's blood sugar is 107. I wanted to do a temp basal increase of 50% for an hour and a half and an extended 12-unit bolus for lunch. But she only has 10 units. So instead, I had her set the temp basal still and do an 8-unit extended bolus. So she's still going to have 4 units going when my wife gets there. They're going to swap that pump real quick. And then she's going to head off to lunch and be okay, right?
She'll be fine. She's got early lunch.
Yeah, on every other day, it's at 10:30. And then on the opposite...
10:30? Like, what, does she get up at 5 o'clock to eat breakfast?
I know, right?
Really, that's...
She eats 10:30 every other day, and the opposite day she eats at 11:30, and she's out of school by 2.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
It's all kind of very quick. I don't know if she's learning anything, but... So anyway, what I wanted to say about basal is that I'm sure just like you, I meet people who are having trouble, right? They're either on the roller coaster and they're going to 400 and they're going to 60 and up and down, or, somewhere in that problem. They're high constantly. They're always 180. They can't really seem to do anything about it. And when they get to you, they have all of these theories about why their blood sugar is too high.
Right.
And I tell them, your blood sugar is too high because you don't have enough insulin and it's not timed correctly. And we're going to start with your basal. And they'll inevitably say, well, what about my insulin to carb? I'm like, that doesn't matter. I'm like, you can have a perfect insulin to carb ratio. If your basal insulin's not right, none of this matters, right?
That's right. That's why we call basal insulin the foundation of your management. It really is. We actually tell people it's like the foundation of a house. Mm-hmm. If you have a sound structure that you're building on top of, everything you put on top of it will work. Even if the insulin to carb and the correction factor and things are a little bit off, if the basal is off, those are going to also look like they're not working well.
And it becomes impossible to diagnose what's happening, right? And so what I end up saying is that you try to imagine, we use round numbers for examples, but try to imagine your basal is a unit an hour. That's what it should be. But you have it at 0.5. And then you look at some food and you say, oh, well, that food is 2 units. So and let's say you're right about that. Let's say you're 100% right that the food takes 2 units. You put your 2 units in. All you've done is now replace the basal that you needed, right?
Right.
So you're resistant, you're high. Now you're replacing your basal. It's possible those 2 units will only go towards impacting the problems your basal insulin has.
Right.
And then your blood sugar shoots up and you go, I don't understand. I put in the right amount of insulin. I counted
my carbs, right?
See, I counted my carbs.
I looked at the label and
I did everything the doctor told me. Why didn't this work? And in the end, and through this series that you and I are going to do together, I'm going to repeat a couple of things over and over that I've found to be incredibly helpful. But in the end, if your blood sugar is high or low, you've mistimed, miscalculated, or a combination of those ideas. And that's pretty much it. That I find that to be the core of it. It's not the first step to me. Not being afraid of insulin is the first step, but we're going to talk about that in a different episode. But I think that it's timing and amount. And I think there's a million other things that can impact your life with diabetes. But that's the seed of the tree, right? And you could throw away all the leaves and all the branches and everything that comes off of that seed. If you have that seed, timing and amount, you're well ahead of the game.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Absolutely. And I would say those two pieces actually go very well together as far as not fearing insulin, not being afraid of using it, because I certainly work with many people who that is a major problem. Mm-hmm. It is, I just want 200 because I'm afraid to give the amount my pump is telling me to give, or the amount that the doctor told me to give, and I think understanding insulin is the base of that. Understanding it and understanding the timing and the action of the insulin and how it also individually works for you helps to dissipate that fear.
Right. I think that if you can keep your blood sugar stable at 200, then you can keep it stable at 180. And if you can do it at 180, you can do it at 140. And believe it or not, if you can do it at 120, then you can do it at 75. And, and so because the tools that you use to achieve that stability aren't different depending on what level your blood sugar is at. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff. Okay. So that's excellent. So we'll talk about fear in an upcoming episode as well. I'm newly diagnosed. I go into my doctor's office. Now, you are uniquely qualified to tell me this. What do people get told at diagnosis, and why do they only get told what is shared with them?
I think there's a wide range of what people are told. I certainly think that the younger the diagnosis, especially for type 1, the younger the diagnosis, the more education there is, the more information is provided. Adults that are diagnosed, I think, unfortunately, get the least amount of education. Again, and it differs system to system and provider to provider. But in the beginning, they're taught how to use a glucometer. They're taught how to give an injection. They're taught you're going to be taught essentially the basics of that insulin action. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be taught carb counting. Right. I mean, that is pretty much the gist of what you're going to be taught.
Anyone who's been listening to this podcast for any amount of time will know that I call that do not die advice. That's the advice you get so that you don't die. It doesn't keep you healthy. It doesn't help you understand anything. It just keeps you from going and falling over.
Well, and I think another piece of that too is it's very, very soon in that beginning is how to avoid hypoglycemia, how to avoid a low blood sugar, because insulin causes low blood sugar. And unfortunately, that's where the fear starts.
Exactly. And so that's where that's where the fear starts. But try to understand it from the clinician's point of view. You are frazzled. I say this all the time. Being diagnosed with a disease that you cannot cure feels like someone just walked up to you with a shovel and smacked you square in the face with it and then started yelling, basal insulin, bolus, glucometer, this is a test strip. And you're like, wait, what? Right. And so the doctor sees that on your face and I guess in their minds, they don't want to overload you. But the unintended problem is just what you said, that you start with fear then. Everything starts with fear. It would be a simple sentence. It would be, listen, we're going to teach this to you slowly. I know that seems counterproductive, but it's not. But there's no reason to be afraid. And that's what we're going to learn. Now, the question is, do doctors not teach that because they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge? Because everyone's going to walk into a different endo's office. You're going to get an 80-year-old guy who's been doing this since people have been boiling their urine. And he's just going to think that if you count your carbs and inject and go to 300 and come back to 100, that's amazing. And that's that, right?
Right.
And then you're going to get a guy who's in his 50s who's just starting to hear about this CGM stuff. And you're going to get different advice from them. You're going to get different advice from a woman who's been out of medical school for 3 years and has diabetes. How do you as the patient know what advice you're getting when you don't know anything about diabetes?
That's a very good question. Absolutely. And I think, with today's technology, honestly, I personally, as people have come to work with me or to work with us at Integrated, it's people come because very soon they realize they're not getting what they need. They're not sure what they're missing,
right?
But they know from researching and looking and Googling it that the information that they've gotten is so just literally the tip of the iceberg, that they're missing so much more beyond. And that, that their doctor is saying, well, you have to be in good control for a year to be able to start on a pump. And most parents or even adults are saying, that's not the case.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. I want to know what I should be doing. I want to know what is the best for my child or for myself. I want to know. And I think those are some of the things that as a newly diagnosed, asking more questions of your provider, even though you may not know exactly what you're asking, when you've Googled it and you've researched and done some of your own searching and even asked, some people, I think more and more people they have acquaintances or whatnot who might have diabetes. And so they will ask and they'll say, well, they're doing this, maybe I should ask about this. And I tell all the people that I work with, what, if your provider is not able to meet you or can't answer even those basic questions at the beginning, it's time, unfortunately, to find a new provider. It really is.
And based off of that idea, I want to say the same thing to two different segments. So if you're a clinician and you're listening to this, or if you're a person who has diabetes or is trying to care for someone who does, there's a space that a lot of people get into. They're not given enough information up front, and they're paying attention, right? They want to do well, they're paying attention, and they see inconsistencies with what's been taught to them in the doctor's office. But because you're the doctor, or because you're looking at a doctor and you were raised to listen to a police officer, your teachers, and a doctor, you're raised to believe that a person in a white coat is infinitely more intelligent than you are. There's no reason to question them. And so when they give you these concrete laws of diabetes, you go home, put these laws into practice, and they don't give you decent results. This is for the doctors. It puts people into such a psychological bad place. It just wrenches their gut. They feel like they're killing themselves or their children, and they don't understand why. And even when common sense things about their diabetes show up, they can't bring themselves to make the leap because you've told them or not told them anything about that idea. And I will give you a great example, and it's a very simple example.
Or kind of before your example, it's kind of a cut and dry too. As, kind of going with what the doctor said. The doctor said to do this. The doctor said I should take my insulin and eat right away. Well, if that's not working and if you don't know that, and clinicians, I think really do need more information about what really is the real life of diabetes.
Right.
What's the real life use of insulin and mastering its action and all of that? Because clinical book does not mean it meets what happens at home. And when your clients come to you, when your patients or people with diabetes come to you and they say, this isn't working, I'm following all of your rules, it's not working. instead of saying, well, you must be doing something wrong, because that happens often, whether as a clinician you want that expression to come out or not, it does.
Yeah.
You make them feel like they're not doing something right.
Right.
And you don't give a way to help. You don't explore with them and say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I hear that you've tried everything I thought would work.
Right.
And it's not. Let's see why it's not working. Maybe something is variable for you.
And let's have more of a conversation and explain what's happening so that the doctor can glean more from what's going on. I'm at the point now, and I'm sure you're there too, I can look at a 24-hour graph and make changes in 5 minutes that improve somebody's life immeasurably in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know why a doctor can't do that. So, I mean, I figured it out.
And some can.
Yes.
Some are awesome, but some are not.
You know me well enough now to know that, I'm not the brightest person in the world. And I can look at it and go, okay, this is this like this. My example of how powerful the doctor's suggestion or non-suggestion can be to people is that I was speaking with a woman in her 40s who had had diabetes for 25 years. I looked at her graph. She was distraught. And I said, you just need more insulin. And she said, well, no, because, and she, like I said, all these reasons why that wasn't the case. And I said, no, that doesn't make sense. And in a brief 30-second explanation over a telephone call, I could literally hear the light bulb turn on in her head. And she went, oh my God, I just need more insulin. And I was like, right, that's it. I mean, can we go now? Or, but think about that. A well-intended, intelligent, educated person who goes to her doctor's visits and in 20 years can't figure out why their blood sugars are the way they are. And no one's ever helped her. So what I'm saying to people who are newly diagnosed or people who have gotten to that point and want to start over, you have to sort of think different. You have to, if you're in a situation where you're newly diagnosed and you've gotten some real, like what I call like old-timey information, you need to think differently. And if you've had diabetes for a long time or been caring for someone forever and it's not going the way you want, that's the first thing you have to do. You have to say to yourself, I must not be thinking, like flip it upside down, look at it all the time. I have a friend who every decision they make is wrong. And I once said to them, how come when you have a reaction to something, you just don't wonder what's completely opposite of that and then just do that? I was like,
right.
You're always wrong.
Right.
So like, and that's what happens. Every day you get up, you do this thing with this insulin and this pump and all this stuff, and it always goes wrong. But yet there you are the next day.
Doing it over and over and over again, which is another reason that I, working especially with the women through pregnancy that I work with, that's a piece of the variability that I try to encourage them to sort of work on prior to pregnancy.
Okay.
Because if you can figure out, it's why many people with diabetes eat some of the same things over and over and over again. They have a standard breakfast. I know that it works. I know that I need this much insulin. I need to use a temporary basal for this much or for, whatever, or an extended bolus. And it works for me. That's the reason. Yeah. Because once you figure it out, you're like, great, I got this little magic piece right here, and I'm not going to screw it up now.
I'm just going to have this half a piece of wheat toast, 2 eggs over easy, and 2 tablespoons of avocado for the rest of my life.
Right, exactly. Every morning.
If that's happening to you, if you're listening and that's happening to you, I say this proudly. There are some low carb people who will get upset. And I want to tell them right now, you could eat low carb your whole life. I don't care. I'm just saying that if you ended up there because you couldn't figure out insulin, if you're eating something you don't want to be eating, there might be a way to manage this. But I tell people very proudly that at this point, my daughter is 14 years old when I'm recording this. She has had type 1 diabetes since she was 2. And for the last 5 years, her A1C has been between 5.2 and 6.2. With absolutely no diet restrictions whatsoever. Anything you can think of, Arden eats and eats frequently.
And I bet her more important within that, I think we talked about this in the A1C discussion and podcast, but more important than even the A1C is her standard deviation, the variability, which I would estimate without even seeing her information, I would estimate that her standard deviation is very nice, meaning she's got these little gentle rolls through the course of the day,
right,
rather than this major roller coaster, because you can have an A1C of 5.4.
Yes.
But
and
you could have
wrong.
Major, standard deviation.
Yep. And we will talk about that in coming episodes. You can't run around with your 6 A1C, but be at 300 half the day and 50 the other half of the day.
Right.
You've just tricked the A1C test.
Right.
Arden,
and the doctor.
Yeah.
Because, again, that goes back to clinicians. Mm-hmm. A1C is certainly, it's a starting place. It is not the end-all, be-all. There is more in-depth that needs to be looked at with that A1C.
Yeah. We try very hard. Well, you know what? As you go on and listen to these episodes, you'll realize I'm not trying that hard anymore. I figured it out to the point where it doesn't really take that much involvement from us. But Arden's low alarm on her Dexcom is set at 70. On my Follow app, it's 120 for the high alarm. On hers, it's 130. Mm-hmm. And so we'll talk about like bumping and nudging later on. But that's my concept, is that smaller amounts of insulin as you try to leave a tight range get you back into that range more quickly and cause far fewer lows later.
Yes.
Give me 1 second here. We'll take a pause.
Okay.
I'm going to text Arden. She's now wearing a new pump. I need to know how much insulin delivered from the last bolus. And then, because it's a new pump and she's literally going to walk right into lunch, I'm going to double her basal I was only going to do 50%. Now I'm just going to double it for an hour and a half. And that way, if there's any slow start with that site absorbing and having action, I'm going to do something that at some point during these, you'll hear me talk about, where I call it over bolusing. Like I imagine not just what her needs are now, but the momentum and higher number that I know is coming. In 2008, we made the decision to get my then 4-year-old daughter an insulin pump. It's a decision that I wish we would have made years sooner. After seeing everything that was available, we easily settled on the Omnipod. Now that was back again in 2008. Today, Arden is about to turn 15 years old, and she has been wearing an Omnipod every day since then. Every day. And as I mentioned in the other ad, Arden's A1C has been between 5.2 and 6.2 for 5 solid years. How do we do that? Well, we start by seeing an insulin pump as more than just a way to not have to take shots. The Omnipod gives you the ability to do temporary basal rates. That's increases or decreases in your background insulin. Extended boluses, which will help you spread out your insulin over the life of a meal. And so much more. The Omnipod has no tubing at all. The pod is self-contained, you wear it on your body, and you control it with a wireless controller. So there's no tubes running through your clothing and no pump that you have to jam in your bra or down your pants or wherever people have to put their pumps. That just doesn't exist with the Omnipod. What does exist is the ability to swim while you're getting your insulin, bathe while you're getting your insulin, and live life untethered. The Omnipod even features self-insertion. Just push a button. Now I want you to go to myomnipod.com/juicebox. And when you get there, you'll get a free, no obligation demonstration pod sent directly to your house. Check it out and see what you think for yourself. I'm going to do something that at some point during these, you'll hear me talk about, where I call it over bolusing. Like I imagine not just what her needs are now, but the momentum and higher number that I know is coming.
Yep.
So
that pod change was one thing that I was always in the beginning. I was very thankful that I had noticed a difference with my Animus pump change, that I needed that site to just be just saturated with insulin to get absorption sooner. So, and I was glad, because when I started Omnipod in 2006, I started doing the same thing that I did with my other pump sites, just temp basaling up by almost 100%.
Yep.
For it was usually about an hour to 2 hours, depending on kind of where I was at that point. And if I was having to change that pod especially, if it was before a meal and I was going to need insulin for that meal with the new pod,
Yep.
I actually, instead of doing it through the pod, I gave an injection because I just found that a bolus with that new pod site, it never went well. Whereas if I did a temp basal increase, I took a bolus via injection for that food that I was going to eat and let the pod get settled in, I didn't have any blood sugar issues.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
No, yeah. It's
everybody's strategy is different.
right. But I'll tell you what that tells me is, and again, this is going to be another sentence you hear over and over again. You have to trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah.
So if you make a pod change and your blood sugar is 90, you still need to do that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay. Hold on. So she got 5.6 units. So I'm going to do a temp basal increase 95% for an hour and bolus 7 units. All now. Go eat as soon as possible. So she's got 5.6 units in from 20 minutes ago or so. She's still 102. And so I'm not scared of those 7 units. She's going to be eating in 5 minutes. And look, the 5.6 units didn't do anything over the last 20 minutes. So
right.
I'm good. My goal here on this bolus is 75 diagonal down while she's about halfway through her meal. Anyway, that's, again, stuff we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And comfort level with what you know will happen, right?
Yeah, and because, and by the way, and these, you have to have these experiences. Like, I'm going to leave this in this episode so that you know that things have to happen that you don't expect because it's data, right? It's I did this and this happened. Next time I'd like this to happen, so I'm going to do sooner, later, more or less, whatever it is I'm going to do. But you can't know that unless something goes wrong.
Right.
Right? And so here's a great tip for somebody starting over or who is newly diagnosed. There are no mistakes. There are only experiences that build on for next time. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, see something happen. Instead, you can't get dramatic. You can't get upset. You can't cry. You can't go, oh my God, I'm killing her. You can't do it, right? You say to yourself, okay, bare bones, what just happened here? I put insulin in here. It went up to there. And then it came down and crashed. I bet you if I would have put that much insulin in sooner and spread it out a little bit, like I could have created the resistance that blood sugar needed, right?
Right.
But if you're busy running around wringing your hands and you gave away an amazing opportunity. And I will use this as an example. This past weekend, I was helping a mother with a 4 or 5-year-old boy. And while I was talking to her, this kid's blood sugar went to 300 off of some Cheerios. And we talked for 20 or 30.
Love that breakfast cereal.
Oh my gosh. We're talking for 20 minutes or so. This poor kid's blood sugar is at 300. It's not moving. And we're getting ready to get off the phone. She's like, he's hungry. I don't know what to do. And I was like, would you like to do something that's going to sound insane? I'll help you. And she goes, I think I'm desperate enough to try something insane. I was like, great. How much insulin do you think it'll take to bring a 300 to 90? And she says, a unit. And I said, how much do you think lunch is going to take? And she said, a unit and a half. I was like, cool. Bolus 2.5 units right now. And she's like, well, what's going to happen? We're going to put his blood sugar into a free fall. And then we're going to add the lunch at exactly the right time. And then with a little bit of fast-acting carbs, if we need to, we'll bring it in for a landing. I said, I'll never leave you. We'll text the whole time. We'll talk again when we have to. So she does it. We get diagonal down 290, 275, 250, 2 hours down 250. She's texting, oh my God. I'm like, no, perfect. Like,
right.
Hold on. I actually texted her a picture of the guys from Star Wars who are trying to blow up the Death Star. I said, stay on target. Like, just don't flinch. Like, don't flinch. 250, 2 down, 240, 230, 200. I said, okay, now's the time to start getting the lunch together. And she laughed. She goes, oh, it's all ready. It's just here on a plate. And I was like, good. I said, when we get the 180, give him the food. So 182 down, kid gets the food. 10 minutes later, now isn't this interesting? We're dropping 10 points every 5 minutes on the CGM. Then he eats. Then all of a sudden the dropping stops. The arrows are still there, but now it takes longer to get to 170. Took even longer to get to 160, and she gets to watch this happen. 150, still 2 down. 140, still 2 down. I said, okay, it's not going to catch the arrows. Do me a favor, give him a few ounces of juice. She says, we don't have juice in the house. And I thought to myself, oh, I just killed a kid over the phone. Goodbye, wrong number. So she says, we treat lows with jelly beans because they hit him so hard. I said, that's great. But do you have any liquid in the house that has carbs in it that's not soda? And she's like, we have lemonade. I said, that's great. I want you to give him 4 ounces of lemonade. So she gives him, and I said, and don't go crazy measuring it. Just give him a little bit of lemonade, right? So she gives him the lemonade, boom, goes to 1 arrow, goes to diagonal down. The kid comes in, I swear to you, 75, nice and stable.
Yeah.
His food's been in for a half an hour. And when it was over, she's like, wow, that was nerve-wracking. I said, okay, I know that. Clear your head and then go back and look at the boluses, look at the time you put the food in, and look at the CGM and figure out how that insulin works in him. Because you just had a master's class, how insulin impacts blood sugar and how food impacts insulin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the place that, as you know, clinicians, they don't have the time to do that. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate in the stance that with something like diabetes, type 1 diabetes specifically, you need that hand-holding in an instance like that. You need the ability to be with somebody who can say, you're okay, ride it out. You're okay. He's going to be fine. You've got jelly beans. You've got juice. You've got honey. You've got something in the house. You've got a mini glucagon that you could use if you need to. He's going to be okay. She's going to be, you're going to be okay.
Yep.
It'll be fine. But you have to use those learning pieces. I think it kind of goes along with a really good friend of mine who has had diabetes a bit longer than me, which is 30 plus years. Her doctor actually gave her kind of a good little hint for numbers. You know, we start to view numbers in diabetes as good and bad, right? And that comes with that feeling of frustration then. And, oh my gosh, I'm like killing myself, or I'm doing something bad or whatever. And he said, you know, the numbers are information. So just like you said, it is, okay, I'm here. Why am I here? Right. You know, what can I learn from this? What can I do better next time? And maybe you analyze it, 3 hours from now, maybe not in the instant, but it's information. And so he told her, when the number is going to come up on the glucometer, you put the test strip in, you put your blood on the strip, and you tell yourself, I am awesome. And here comes a number.
Right. Yeah, because
right?
It'll tell me what to do next. And it can't be a judgment. You can't feel judged by it. You can't you can't look at it and say bad low. You can say not what I wanted, not what I was shooting for.
Right.
But what gets me to what I'm shooting for. And it's funny, as you and I are pretty much wrapping up this first thought, right? I have so many people ask me when they're first diagnosed, what are the things I need to know? And I find around diabetes in general, everyone's looking for an amount or a number from you. Just please tell me how many minutes I should pre-bolus. Please tell me how many units I should do if his blood sugar is like this. And I tell them all the time, I don't know. Figure it out for yourself. And you will, right? Like you have to. But I can't give you, no one can tell you that a 10-minute pre-bolus is going to be what's right for you in any given situation, let alone all the time. I think it's insane that we think that just because we've set a basal rate of, 1.5 units at 2 a.m., that we think that that's what our body's going to need every day at 2 a.m. It's insane. It's insanity to think that. It's just the best we have with the technology we have at the moment.
Exactly.
And so if you listen to this thinking someone's going to tell me the rules about what I need to do when I'm starting with diabetes, we did. We told you what to do. It just isn't what you expected.
Right.
And so I get that. I understand that it's not a pill disease. It's not take 3 of these a day and you have to have food with them. Like it's not that easy.
And I think as a general too, in the beginning of learning that comfort level and learning what works for you by watching, you also have to take into that the variables that can mean what you did figure out. needs to change because of such and such variable, right?
Yes.
So, my breakfast in the morning, if I don't get to go to the gym before or after, my normal breakfast, which I like it, which is why I eat almost the same thing every single day. And it works nicely blood sugar wise, but I like it. So, and it's easy. So, but the variables that I had to figure out were pre-eating it exercise, post-eating it exercise. Those are the variables, and so what works in a morning where I'm not exercising at all is completely different than the mornings when I have exercise at such or such time.
Of course. The variables are forever changing, which is why you have to, interestingly, know what they are and at the same time completely ignore them. And what I mean by that is that you're not a machine, right? So there's certain things that are going to make sense, like you just said. I know if I exercise prior or post that this changes how this bolus needs to be. But if you're walking around trying to decide constantly, am I anxious? Did I just bang my knee? Am I going to get a cold? The thing I see people saying online all the time, like his blood sugar's going up. He's going to get sick 3 days from now. I'm like, oh my God, just give him more insulin. Like, who cares if he gets sick 3 days from now? And so that's what I think of when I say be fluid. I just that it's going to keep changing at such a rate that for you to try to apply static rules to it is insane.
You've got that piece of life with diabetes that you can then bring into education, which is why people usually come to us, because we understand it from the living it standpoint, not from this is what the clinical book says should be happening. Yep. So do this.
I'm incredibly proud to say that I've gotten to the point where if I can talk to somebody for about 45 minutes or an hour, they can have a major change in just a couple of days. And that's communication. That's what that is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I have in mind, Jenny, for this series. Today we talked about being newly diagnosed or starting over. The next episode will be about multiple daily injections, or MDI. We'll do an episode about insulin, bolusing, pumping, CGMs, and on until you and I finish covering every aspect of the things that we talk about on this show. Please remember that the Juicebox Podcast wouldn't be possible without its sponsors. For today's episode, Omnipod and Dexcom. Dexcom, the makers of the G6 continuous glucose monitor. And of course, Omnipod is the tubeless insulin pump that Arden has been wearing for over a decade. You can go to myomnipod.com/juicebox to get a free, no obligation demo of the pump sent right to your house. Or you can go to dexcom.com/juicebox to find out more about Arden's CGM. Heck, you could do both. Jennifer Smith has lived with type 1 diabetes since she was a child. And so she has firsthand knowledge of day-to-day events that affect diabetes management. Jenny holds a bachelor's degree in human nutrition and biology from the University of Wisconsin. She's a registered and licensed dietitian, certified diabetes educator, and a certified trainer of most makes and models of insulin pumps and glucose monitors. She's an active member of the American Diabetes Association, the American Association of Diabetes Educators. Jenny also co-authored the book Pregnancy with Type 1 Diabetes, Your Month-to-Month Guide to Blood Sugar Management. It's available on Amazon, and there's a link in the show notes. All that aside, Jenny's just a nice person, and I like having her on the show, and I love the way she thinks about type 1 diabetes. I am incredibly lucky that she's doing this series with me. I initially shared my idea with Jenny about putting together a series of shorter podcast episodes that would help people transition from their starting point with type 1 diabetes, because there's just no good reason to struggle. All you need are the right tools and a knowledge of how to use them. And that's what we're hoping to bring you. So when you see the next episode and it's about multiple daily injections, don't skip it because you're pumping. Listen, there's good information in each one. By the time you get to the end of my talks with Jenny, it's going to feel like you sat in a room with her and I and hashed out every possible angle that you're going to need to understand. Because of the nature of these podcasts, I want to mention again that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, to always consult a physician before becoming bold with insulin or making any changes to your healthcare plan. If you found this podcast to be valuable, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and a review. And don't forget to tell a friend. The podcast grows when you share it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Best of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're interested in the rest of the Diabetes Pro Tips series, again, you can find it at juiceboxpodcast.com, diabetesprotip.com, or by going in your podcast app and searching Juicebox, all one word, and Pro Tip. That's 2 words, Juicebox Pro Tip. They should all pop right up in front of you. There are 25 episodes in the Pro Tips series. This is episode 210, of course, but episode 211 is all about MDI. Episode 212, all about insulin. Episode 217, pre-bolus. Episode 218, temp basal. 219, insulin pumping. 224, mastering a CGM. 225, bump and nudge. 226, the perfect bolus. 231, variables. 237, setting your basal insulin. Episode 256 is about exercise. Episode 263, fat and protein. Episode 287, illness, injury, and surgery. 301, glucagon and low BGs. 307, emergency room protocols. 311, long-term health. Episode 350, bump and nudge part 2. Episode 364, pregnancy. 371, explaining type 1. That's an episode that you can give to people, and it will explain type 1 diabetes to them. Episode 391, glycemic index and load. Don't skip that one. 449, postpartum. 470, weight loss. 608, honeymoon. 612, female hormones. And God knows there'll probably be more one day. Check them out. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with someone who you think might also enjoy it. And don't forget to check out the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.